This is one of the biggest seasons in Nebraska football history, and for that reason, expectations are through the roof. A lot of fans are expecting 7, 8, even 9 wins for Nebraska, but with optimism comes pessimism. So in today's video, I'm going to be going over my best and worst case scenarios for Matt Rhule and the Huskers in 2024, and we're going to be going over my keys to success, how to win, and how do you lose. So really quick, before I dive into it, make sure to hit that like button if you're starting to get fired up about the fall. Man, it's getting here quick. And hey, please subscribe to the channel. I post a video about Nebraska football and Nebraska recruiting every single day, and we have the best family here on Husker YouTube. So if you enjoy daily content, talking about your favorite team, what are you doing? Please hit that subscribe button. It would help me out greatly. But without further ado, let's get into it. Talking about Nebraska's upcoming season, specifically the best and worst case scenarios for the Huskers. And let's just start off with the worst case scenario. If everything goes wrong for Matt Rhule, Nebraska, what happens? Well, there were 4 reasons why the Huskers struggled last year: quarterback play, special teams, injuries, and last but not least, losing in close games. So for that reason, those 4 issues, they may persist again for Nebraska. Listen, the first 7 games for the Huskers, they look very easy. You play teams like Colorado, Northern Iowa, UTEP, before you get into Big Ten play against Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana, all struggling teams. And for that reason, a lot of Nebraska fans think they can start off 7-0. But let's say, again, let's put on our imagination cap, worst case scenario for the Huskers. Well, first thing that plagued you last year is quarterback play. Dylan Raiola is a true freshman quarterback. Yes, as talented as ever. But once again, let's put on our imagination cap. Let's say he struggles. A lot of Power 5 quarterbacks have struggled throughout their first year. He's not used to the speed of the game. He doesn't know the entire playbook. He throws a couple picks here and there because he's unable to read defenses. For that reason, you may drop that Colorado game against a very good secondary that the Buffaloes have. The second issue that may persist again, field goal kicking, right? Tristan Alvano is set to become the starting kicker once again for Nebraska. Yes, there's going to be a little bit of a battle, but let's say once again he struggles for Nebraska and you don't have a second option. Number 3, the injury problem for the Huskers. That's something we've seen a lot of in the past, specifically last year. Nebraska's wide receiver corps was decimated by injuries and the running backs. So let's say that happens once again. Emmett Johnson goes down. Gabe Irvin goes down. You see a guy like Jalen Lloyd, Jamal Banks go down. And then the offensive line once again gets decimated too. You're sitting there with 8, 9, 10 guys out on injury. And that's not even, though, the worst case scenario. That's happened before for Nebraska in recent memory. So we better, expect it to happen again. And last but not least, something that's plagued Nebraska, close losses. Now, this happened under Scott Frost. And unfortunately, it happened again with Matt Rhule. Nebraska lost their 4 last games last season, and they were all in close fashion where Matt Rhule and Nebraska, they had an opportunity to win, and they didn't do so. All 4 of those things, in order for Nebraska to have a worst-case scenario season, they have to happen again. So let's just start at say we lose that Colorado game. Dylan Raiola struggles once again. I mean, that's a Colorado team that's very talented. You can't dispute that. But we start off 1-1. Then we beat Northern Iowa next week, no problem, 2-1. Then you get into Big Ten play. Illinois comes to town. That's a team you've struggled against in the past. Let's say you win that football game just barely. You're sitting at 3-1. Hey, this doesn't sound like a worst case scenario at all. That changes with the next week. You go over to Purdue, another team you struggled against in the past. You've definitely struggled in West Lafayette. Give Purdue a lot of crap. They're not great offensively, but their defense is one of the best in football. And Ryan Walters, he's a defensive-minded head coach. You lose that game in West Lafayette, a place that you've lost a lot in the past as well. 3-2. You beat Indiana next week, no problem, 4-2. And then you lose to Rutgers, a team that's on the up and up. They've made bowl games the last 3 seasons. You're sitting at 4-3. Now, that's not too bad for Nebraska. You only need 2 more wins to make a bowl game. And then you turn your head and you look at the final 5 games. Ohio State, that's a loss. You're not going to beat the Buckeyes in Columbus. Then you go ahead and play USC on the road. That's a loss. Then you go ahead and play UCLA at home. That's a tough game for Nebraska, but once again, throughout this season, this fake season that we're going over, they've struggled in close games. They struggle once again, they lose. Look at that. You're 4-6 with 2 games left. Wisconsin and Iowa, 2 teams that you've struggled against the last decade. You go ahead and play Wisconsin at home. You haven't beat them since 2012. It doesn't change this year. You lose again. You're 4-7. You play Iowa at Kinnick Stadium, a night game, and you lose. 4-8 is the worst case scenario for Nebraska this season. And again, the things that have to happen in that scenario. Raiola struggles. He's not the quarterback we think he is, at least off the gates. That would not, be such a surprising outcome because true freshman quarterbacks struggle all the time. Number 2, the field goal issues happen once again. Number 3, this team gets a lot of injuries and they get them quick. And number 4, you still cannot win close games, an issue that has plagued Nebraska, honestly, since the Mike Riley era. So that's the worst case scenario for Nebraska. But here's the silver lining. That's not going to happen because we have Matt Rhule and we have a best case scenario that we're about to go over. So again, I talked about how the 7-game stretch for Nebraska is very easy. You can take advantage of that if you have a good team and a good head coach. Matt Rhule is one of the best coaches in the country. Not only that, but I think Dylan Raiola is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country. In my last scenario, I talked about Dylan Raiola struggling throughout his true freshman campaign. In this scenario, Dylan Raiola is going to be one of the best quarterbacks, not only of any freshman, but in the country, period. He's going to be in the mix for all Big Ten. So that's the first thing. In order to have a best case scenario, Dylan Raiola has got to be playing his A game. Number 2, you've got to find a kicker who can make field goals, whether that's Tristan Alvano, whether that's Nico Ottamelli, who's also in the mix, whether that's the new guy you brought in, Jacob Wool. Okay, whoever's going to start a kicker, they need to knock down kicks at least within 40 yards. That's huge. And then the big theme this offseason has been chasing 3. That's been Matt Rhule's slogan. You've got to chase 3. You've got to win games in crunch time. Again, the reason why they say chasing 3 is because Nebraska lost by a combined 3 points in those final 4 games. You got to win those close games. You got to be clutch. And if Nebraska can do all 3 of those things, along with, not having the injury bug, and that's something we can really control, I expect Nebraska to start off 7-0. You beat Colorado at home. You finally get revenge on, Deion Sanders and his sons. Then you start off Big Ten play. You beat Illinois at home. You go ahead and beat a Purdue team that's honestly not that good. You beat Indiana. Look, you're 6-0, and then you go over to Rutgers. That's going to be a tough game for Nebraska, but that we are more talented than the Scarlet Knights. I think they're very well coached, and I think it's going to be a hard game on the road, but you win. So you're starting off 7-0. Dylan Raiola is playing phenomenal. Then you're looking dead ahead at our final 5-game stretch. We lose to Ohio State. Now, I really cannot see a scenario where Nebraska beats Ohio State. Ohio State's one of the best teams in the country. This is the most talented they've been since they've had Urban Meyer as their head coach. They should be in the mix to win the national title, and for that reason, Nebraska loses. Then you play USC, UCLA. You split that series. You go 1-1. USC is going to be a lot better this year. I expect them to win 9, 10, even 11 games. And UCLA, a lot of people think they're going to be bad, but I'd expect them to be around 6, 7, 9, or even 8 wins. So in UCLA, another talented team. Nebraska goes 1-1. You're sitting at the end of that stretch with 2 games remaining at 8-2. Not bad for Nebraska. You're ranked. You're in the college football playoff hunt, and you play Wisconsin and Iowa. Now, Nebraska should have beat both of those teams last year. They play Wisconsin first. You play that at home. You will finally beat the Badgers and Luke Fickell. Again, that was a very close game last year. Dylan Raiola is the X factor. You had Chuba Purdy start for you last year, one of the worst quarterbacks in Power 5. You go to one of the best. That's enough to turn the tides. Nebraska goes to 9-2 with one final game against their foe in Iowa City, the Iowa Hawkeyes. You go over to Kinnick Stadium, last game of the year, Black Friday, night game, and you destroy Iowa the exact same way you did in 2022. The offense is on fire. Jamal Banks has a great game. The team is healthy, and you end off 10-2 in prime position to make the college football playoff. Now, that's the best case scenario for Nebraska. Am I saying that's going to happen? Absolutely not. Okay, you need a lot of things to go right. The same way you need a lot of things to go wrong in the worst case scenario. But I do think the best case scenario is a lot more likely than the worst case because of 2 reasons. Number 1, I am very confident in Matt Rhule in what he brings to the table as a coach. When he was hired by Nebraska, I truly believe, and I still believe this, that he was going to be one of the best game manager head coaches. Now, we didn't see that last year. We're going to see that this year. We're going to win close games. Number 2, I believe the talent on this team is the best we've seen since the Bo Pelini era. There are many guys who I believe are going to go to the NFL, who are going to be all Big Ten. And for that reason, I think we're finally going to turn the tide against teams like Wisconsin, Iowa, and win those big games. And yeah, 10-2, best case scenario for Nebraska. Now, do I think that happens? Probably not. Again, I think we're probably going to be around 7-8 wins, and we're going to lose some games we shouldn't, and we might win a game or 2 that we shouldn't win. That's all fine and dandy. It's all part of the process. I do know one thing. We're going to be successful this season, and then going into 2025, we're going to be one of the best teams in the country, period, and we'll be in the mix to win the Big Ten. So let me know down below, what are your best and worst case scenarios for Nebraska this season? What do you think is our top end, our bottom end, and where do you think we're going to end up in the middle? And hey, if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And as always, folks, go Big Red, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.